So Doug Price, aka the Agave Social Podcast, which by the way is an awesome podcast if you are into agave spirits, recently posted that ElVelo is a great option for cocktailing. Obviously, I'm thrilled to hear that because that's exactly the ethos that we approached when we were developing ElVelo. So I thought, here's a great opportunity to better explain some of the production processes and just the thought that went into this to create it when we did. ElVelo was born at a time when I kept having bartenders as I was traveling around mentioning like, what are the chances we get something that is higher proof, still traditionally made with no additives, and on top of that, at a really good price point, like a viable pour cost, like price per ounce. That's basically an impossibility, right? You want higher proof, still traditional, and a better price. And so we kind of began this journey of talking with a number of different distillers all throughout tequila. We ended up partnering with La Cofradia, which is NOM 1137. When we met the family and started speaking with them about the process, they said, La Cofradia translates to the brotherhood, and that is very much the ideals that they operate under. So the brotherhood is established by whatever the guest wants, whatever the client wants, right? And so they can tweak their production processes to best fit whatever it is that particular brand or individual is striving for. When we started going through things, we set protocols for everything from like, how old are the agaves? What do we want minimum brix content to be? We were sourcing only from the valley, especially when we were thinking about cocktailing tequila. I actually always leaned into the profile of valley tequilas for cocktails. So minimum 6 years of age for the agave, minimum 21% brix content. We then looked through the whole production process. So slow cooked in steam powered ovens, but we discussed the option of, is there any way to extend the cook time or slow it down, drop the temperature, alter the pressure? Those things weren't options at the time because the boilers were really fine-tuned for executing the cook at a particular temperature and pressure, etc. The point is that we wanted to extend the cook because we knew that by extending that process, it's like cooking meat low and slow for barbecue. Like you just develop that much deeper flavor, more character, and it's a traditional process, right? You're not utilizing additives, you're not utilizing accelerants, things like that. So we extended the rest. So typically, they would open the oven doors and allow the agaves to cool down relatively quickly over like 12 to 18 hours before they then crush and go to fermentation. Whereas for ElVelo, what we do is they actually time it so they usually end the cook at the end of the day on a Friday, and then they just leave the doors closed and turn off the ovens, right? And so we trap all the heat, all the moisture, everything in the ovens, and they don't open them until Monday. Keeping all of that concentrated temperature and allowing those agaves to slowly come down from cook, we were able to see a pretty substantial increase in fermentable sugars, as well as developed very big flavor profile from the agave itself once it was distilled. Because they do also take a little bit of the aguas amargas, which are known as the bitter waters, usually removed from the first 10 hours of cooking. And that's a pretty common practice for a lot of different tequila producers that are using traditional hornos, like your steam-powered ovens for cooking. So they take a little bit of the aguas amargas, and then they actually use it to sour or acidify the ferment, the mash itself. And by doing so, that actually keeps some bacterial propagation from occurring, right? By acidifying, it's similar to sour mashing in your whiskeys, right? Like it creates a consistency standard, and then also basically prevents certain bacteria from forming. However, it does create a little bit of a unique kind of funky profile because you're adding these bittered elements back into the ferment. And so that is where part of the La Cofradia funk, in my opinion, comes from. That's my best guess as the direct source in production that creates that funky profile. Through the kind of longer cooking process, what I noticed was that we didn't necessarily have as much as that funk, but we did have really big punchy agave flavor. We do crush utilizing their proprietary crushing mechanism, which is kind of like a masticator. So it just kind of crunches in on the agave fibers. It then runs through 2 more roller mills, open air wild fermented in stainless steel tanks, and then double distilled in copper lined stainless steel pot. We then tasted 11 different proof points, ranging all the way from 40% ABV all the way up to 55% ABV, right? So from 80 proof up to 110, which is basically the range where you can legally still be called tequila. We did this myself, the master distiller, Carlos Hernandez Ramos, his son, Charlie Hernandez, and we narrowed it down to kind of like the section where we felt proof was best showcasing big, punchy agave flavor. And once we figured that out, we then said, okay, well, the intent here is cocktails. It's not necessarily sipping, so we've got to try it in cocktail too. So we gathered bartenders from the United States, from Mexico, tested that in 5 different cocktails. So we did Tommy's Margarita, a Paloma, a Rosita. We did like a frozen mango margarita situation. And then lastly, we took pineapple juice and a ton of Angostura bitters and cream of coconut and kind of did just, we threw as much at it as we possibly can. We blinded all 5 of those cocktails at 3 different proof points. And all the panelists blind unanimously selected 89 proof as the favorite. So that's why we went to bottle at 89. From there, we set standards on aeration and oxidation because that was also important. How long are we actually allowing this to aerate? And then since then, we obviously also have a Reposado that's also bottled at 89 proof. But we use first, second, and third fill ex-Jack Daniels barrels. And after about 3 fills, we are then also introducing some rechar, right? So we've recharred some of the casks, restored some of them, and all maturation is happening in these cool, humid cave cellars. And that's because we're trying to slow the evaporation of water, because otherwise, obviously in a hot climate, you're getting really intense push and pull in and out of the wood. And for ElVelo in particular, we didn't want that too intense. We still wanted to retain big agave flavor while getting good kind of oak extractives. And that seems to happen best in that kind of cool, humid environment. And we are going into barrel at 55%, so at full kind of still strength. Lastly, we were always written contractually to not have any additives in the process, right? Which, in my opinion, was that much more important, especially when we're at La Cofradia, because again, it is whatever the client wants. And some of the brands coming out of there, the clients did specify the use of additives. So when Tequila Matchmaker launched the confirmation program, the additive-free kind of program, or now the Additive-Free Alliance, it was really important to us that we did get part of that program as quickly as we could, because even though it was contractually stated, having a third party that would go in and test and analyze and at no cost to the brand was a big deal. Like there was no fee. All we had to do was schedule getting them to the distillery when we were distilling so that they could take samples. So, being able to officially be confirmed that there are no additives in there, that was a big deal. Anyways, that's ElVelo in a nutshell. I know I've done videos about this before, but I kind of wanted to give a long, full glance at things because this is all the thought and philosophy that went into this from early on. Cheers.